Hello, my name is Grace Mohammed, and I just want to talk to you guys about what we're doing here in Hebrew Home. Recently, we've seen a few videos about the Pentateuch. We're taking along the journey about God's faithfulness and His goodness all through the Pentateuch, the 5 books of Moses. Now, I'll just go with Samuel first because going into the book of Samuel, especially coming from the book of Judges, if you have read Judges before, you're going to see that a lot of things were going on. So many judges coming up to be able to judge Israel after they settled in the promised land. Then the last judge we're going to see is the Samuel himself, who, when he came into the picture, he actually not just be a judge, but also almost like the priest for the people. Now, the entire book of Samuel is all talking about the rising of the kings, because we're moving transitioning from judges to having kings in the land of Israel. And why is that? Yes, God had a plan for that to happen, but unfortunately, the people were a little bit ahead of the shadow that they even requested for the king, which God was not happy about. And why? Because He had a plan. Now, the whole point of the kingship is not just having a king. They said they want it for their own selfish interest, to be like the other nation. But however, they were chosen to be not like other nations. And so, Samuel coming to the picture as a judge, transitioning to rising the kings or helping them to have a king, was not just about having a king, like I said earlier. God is the king already. He is the king. He is their leader. He's only using the prophets, starting with Moses, using the judges to be their leader. Like He is their leader, but He's using them to lead them. So here is the whole message. He is the king. He wants to be their king the whole time, but they miss the whole point because He gave them a law and made a covenant with them to keep that covenant. But here is what they miss. They focus on having a physical leader and forgetting about God's covenant that He has given to them. Because we already saw in the Pentateuch how much He wanted to be with them, to live among them, making those covenants so that they have the best and they be the beacon for the rest of the nations. Because His all plan was not just about Israel, it's entirely the entire world. And that is why we're going to see how it plays out in other nations coming to be part of Israel in the history. And so in Samuel now, again, he came in to help these people realize that what they're requesting for is a wrong request. They should focus on God being their king and His covenant. And whoever He's going to put in leadership should help them follow this covenant duly, not just for having been like other nations, because other nations have been going against God's desire and plan for humanity. And so He now brought Israel up to be that light, to be able to show His own standard in how He is the only king to the entire world, starting with Israel. And so that was what the book of Samuel was all about. So He came in to help them see that clearly, that they should focus on obeying His covenant, not just having a king, because this king also is under the law and the covenant He has given to them. And so He now ended up giving them Saul. And Saul, at the end of the day, what happened? It didn't end up so well, because he wasn't the actual chosen king, or the one God had in mind to give to them, that will lead them to worship Him definitely and faithfully. But later we're going to see that another king came up. We all know this king very well. We talk about him so much. We always admire him. And why do we admire this king? King David. Because we see in the life of David, he lived out the leadership God wanted, that he is a king, but David is there to lead them to Him, because David lived under the law and he was after the heart of God, His covenant. Why was he called the man after my heart? Because the heart of God is His covenant. And so David was fully focused on keeping the covenant of God. And that is why even in his mistakes, he knows he's under the law and the covenant of God, and that's why he easily repented. Different from Saul, that he didn't even have any relationship with God or His covenant. And that's why everything he did, he will end up saying to Samuel, oh, your God this, your God that. But for David, he is my God, he is my king, and I'm just a tool to be used to lead the nation. And he did just that. And that is why any other king comes after David will be given example like after my servant David, because of my covenant with David. Even though, yes, the covenant even God made with David was a kingship that will last forever. Now God was already setting up his redemptive plan of the Messiah to come. And this is how he now started with David, by giving that covenant to David, saying that a king will never, like, will have a king in your throne forever. Knowing fully that later none of his children end up staying forever in the kingship. However, God was planning for the future, the Messianic king, which is Jesus, the King of Kings. But yes, we see the life of David show clearly what God wanted for the people. And this is something that is very, very key and very, very important even for every other nation. And we can see that what happened in Samuel. David came up, rose up as a king, just like we said, the rise of the kings, right? Then it takes us into the book of the kings. We now have so many kings lined up, which we're now going to see the son of David coming up, King Solomon. What happened in the kings? It started with David growing old and leaving the sin. And actually, when we come to talk about when actually Samuel was written, what was during this period of time of King Saul and David. Now, when Solomon came into the picture, later the kings was written will be when the Israelites actually left for exile. And what led the people to exile? Now, this is the sad part of the whole story of the book of Kings. They focus on disobeying God and his covenant. And they focus on trying to be like other nations. Because after Solomon, we know the story very well. He came to a very peak of success, prosperity. And even nations were coming to King Solomon to learn from his wisdom. And one of the examples was Queen Sheba. She came, she was like, this your God is a true. She confessed faith and saying like, he has put in Solomon to bring justice and righteousness. And that is the exact purpose of God using these kings to be able to minister his justice and righteousness on earth, knowing that the world is broken. It's a messed up place. Now he is using Solomon to bring that to pass and restoring back what humanity have been missing. Peace, because during the reign of Solomon, there was peace for all his time. David fought all the war, and he now make it possible for Solomon to have peaceful time. It was like nothing like have ever like happened before, ever in the history of Israel. And so ever this time, like Solomon now had this peak, this success, this like kind of like a crescendo of everything in the life of Israel. Solomon was able to achieve that by keeping the covenant. I even asked God to help him to be the wise man, right? Which is why we now get to know about him. And God even gave him much more. And that, again, he shone the light. He became the beacon to the nations that came to testify of this God. And that was the purpose, that other nations also come to see and be part of God's plan for humanity, redemptive plan. But it was a very short-lived period. Because we all know what happened with Solomon. At the end of the day, right, he started going against the covenant. And unfortunately, it didn't end well. God wasn't happy. He told him, okay, I'm going to divide this nation into two. For disobeying, for going against what I asked you not to do. If you read carefully, there's so many things he did that was against the covenant. Already they have law, they have blessings and curses. Everything was set out. They know exactly what is required. But when Solomon started to go down the drain, it went bad. The glory went, in fact, God was merciful to give him little time, at least not to, I wouldn't say embarrassing, but like help him see that it's so important that his glory is being shown. So he now lets Solomon to at least enjoy it for the time he's alive. The moment his son came in, Rehoboam, which again we know the story very well, he actually exhibited exactly what God already said will happen, and which led to the division of the kingdom. And that is the beginning of everything that led Israel to exile. Some kings came in and tried to restore this covenant and follow the covenant because that's God's heart. But some will come in and take the people back to idolatry, becoming like other nations. And unfortunately, years later, the northern kingdom went to exile by the Assyrians, and the southern kingdom went to exile by the Babylonians. And that's how the entire story of Kings was written. And talking about who actually might have written this book, we're suspecting Prophet Jeremiah, because if you notice carefully or read carefully, we have a lot of prophets. All the prophets you have later in the Bible, actually some of them were prophets that lived in the time of the kings, speaking on behalf of God, representing God to the kings, to warn them of the wrong they're doing. But however, we see this, that all these prophets did all they were called to do. And if I like the entire book, I actually titled the book of Kings, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Why? Because these kings that were coming in to be representative of God, leading people to God, worship of God and keeping his covenant, didn't do it. And these prophets were there to tell them. And I think we've seen even an example with King David. When he was told of his sin, what did he do? He repented. And that was what it's supposed to be. So how it happened with the kings, they keep disobeying. And they end up going to exile. And the writer, Jeremiah, wrote to show them that you guys take responsibility of your actions. This is why you are in exile. So don't complain, don't be bitter, don't even try to make it about yourself, because you have let pride get into you, and God has already made his word clear. Obey blessings, disobey curses. And you got the curses now, so why are you complaining? So he wrote the kings to show their sin clearly to them, in the perspective of God seeing what they have done, and the grievance, and yes, the grievance from God's side, to see how painful it is for him to see that these people he have made, these people we have raised up, are actually doing opposite what he wanted them to do, to bring glory to his name and to the rest of the nation. And so Jeremiah, as you all even know his story, the weeping prophet, he did all he could to help them see that they are wrong, but they didn't listen. They end up in exile. And that is why the entire book of Kings is really the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so that's what we learn from these two books. Samuel, helping us to see God's desire for even the leadership you're going to set up. And we see how it end up, this leadership, and how they end up in exile. And so that's what the Kings mostly is all about. And yeah. And who very soon we're going to go into the prophet to talk about how the prophets were used to bring these messages to people. And so that's what we've done recently. And I pray that for me, my takeaway from all these books actually, and the applications, because it's all talk about leadership principle. And I'm talking about this recently. I mean, Israel is at war. It's really sad. I don't want to go into that at the stage, but what application I walk away from this, from learning the history of all this, is even the leadership of our government. As much as we want to think, yes, the government is God's plan. He already set up all this through the life of Israelites, and they missed it. And that's the same thing we're doing today. That our government, we're supposed to serve God and serve the people, and be an example that will lead people to God, not mislead people away from God. That is what the purpose is. Let's go to the church too. Now that we have the church today as being the light of the world, the same thing. How is the leadership of the church going on? Are we leading people to Christ, or are we making it about ourselves? Because whatever we're doing as leaders, we are being there to represent God, not ourselves. We are only tools in the hands of God. That Christ came and even served. He left heaven in all his glory to serve us. He humbled himself like God himself. So what example do we need more? To lead as leaders, to be servants to people. Serving God, leading them to Christ. So I just hope that God will really help us to know that his desire for our lives all the time is about him and his glory. When we give fully our life to him, definitely we'll see our life in a way that is glorifying him in a way that don't make it so much about us. But we start making it about us, then we start getting frustrated and start competing and comparing ourselves with others. But that's not God's desire for us. His desire is for us to do everything for His glory. Also, as you're listening to all these videos, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and please make comments. Feel free to even ask questions if you can, because we're here to help us understand the word better. May the Lord bless us. Amen.